Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1770 AN. Today's date is January 20th, 2019, and the title of the episode is The Central Banks Are Quietly Being Maneuvered into Their Own Destruction. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, Trump tweeted out something very interesting today about the economy, where he said it's all about the economy, but I'm going to be getting into his tweet a little bit later in this report. But the reason why Trump and the Patriots are continually pushing the economy on the mainstream media is because they are maneuvering the mainstream media and the central bank down this path in this gigantic maze. And every time the mainstream media or the central bank moves in a different direction, they course correct them and they bring them back. And there's a reason for this, because they want them to follow the plan. Now, the mainstream media and the central bank, they don't know they're following this plan. They think, oh, we have one on him. Or, ooh, look at this. We're going to go in this direction because Trump is going in this direction. Trump, the Patriots, they understand how to manipulate this economy. They're using the same exact tools as the deep state. I do believe that Trump has full control over the Fed and can have the Fed do whatever he wants. They are not independent anymore. They're dependent on him. Powell, I do believe, is working for Trump. And what we're seeing right now is they're bringing the Fed, the mainstream media, down this path through this gigantic maze to eventually audit and abolish the Fed, the IRS, and expose the mainstream media. And we're going to be getting into that in just a minute. But first, I wanted to start off with what's happening out in the UK with the Brexit. And we know the Brexit deal didn't go through. And of course, the Brexit deal was not for the people of the UK. This was for the EU, for the central bankers. This is what they wanted. But something very interesting is happening. Australia is forming a bilateral trade agreement with the UK. And this is a wine agreement. And what they're doing is they're making this deal if the Brexit actually does happen. But what I find very interesting about this is that it's a bilateral trade agreement. If the UK would do what Trump is doing, what China is doing, and make these bilateral trade agreements, the EU would be in trouble. So let me go through what they've done here. This new bilateral trade agreement, which is the wine agreement and mutual recognition agreement, was signed in London on Saturday, designed to help ease the continued flow of post-Brexit trade between Australia and the UK. And they're doing this because they understand they need to continue to have trade no matter what. Trump got rid of all the globalist trade deals, most of them anyhow, or renegotiated a lot of the globalist trade deals. And he started to talk to other countries, and he started to have bilateral trade agreements with these other countries. China does the same thing, and Russia does the same thing, where they have these bilateral trade agreements. And it's actually a good thing to have separate trade agreements with each country, because if one goes south, you don't have to worry about the rest. It's decentralized. And we can see that the UK should go ahead and start making bilateral trade agreements with the US and many other countries. Because if they did do this, they would have the upper hand. But you need to remember that the central bank, the government of the UK, they're working hand in hand. So this is a little difficult right now. I'm really surprised that they went ahead and they did this trade deal. They should do many others. And actually, Trump tweeted out when May presented her Brexit plan, he said, yeah, this is not going to benefit. This is going to hurt trade with the U.S. This is actually leaning towards more the EU than anything else. And he was absolutely right. And this is why Parliament in the UK said, no, we're not taking this deal. Here in the U.S., we're seeing the economy break down. Now, we need to remember, this is very different than what the corporate media, the mainstream media is talking about. The mainstream media, They're playing it up because they do believe that the plan is to bring down the economy during the election time and blame it on Trump. Because this has been their plan, and remember, they re-strategized. They had to come up with a different plan because Trump threw a curveball into the whole planning of the economy. And if we go back to 2008, we've been watching, studying, looking at the unemployment numbers, the GDP numbers, the statistical numbers, looking on Main Street to see how Main Street is actually doing. And from everything that we've been looking at, from all the different indicators, we have noticed that this economy was built on an illusion. And Trump right now is keeping the illusion alive. Now, they didn't expect him to do this. They didn't expect him to understand or take control of the magic wand, which controls pretty much everything. Remember, this is not an open and free market. The stock market is completely manipulated. The interest rates are completely manipulated. Gold and silver, completely manipulated. And everything else that you're seeing, all these statistical numbers, completely manipulated. But he understood that he was going to have to make the economy look incredible because they understood what they were trying to do. And they were hoping that he'd be in office for a year. And then all of a sudden they say, okay, the economy's falling apart. And hopefully they destroy the economy and then get rid of him during that period of time. But he flipped it on them and he made the economy great. And he continually is out there telling everyone how great the economy is. And the mainstream media, they're trying to fight this. But it's difficult for them to fight this because it's the same statistical numbers they've been using year after year after year. And they can't come out and tell everyone that these are all fake. And this is the problem they're having right now. But the real economy, the people's economy, we can see it's completely falling apart. Gymboree right now, they declared bankruptcy. They were hoping to get out of this, but it looks like they're going to be closing 900 stores right now, and it doesn't look good. And this is because the American person, they're barely getting by. They're barely making ends meet. Wages have not increased to keep up with the devaluing dollar. We're seeing inflation in many different areas. I mean, think about it. We're seeing inflation in health insurance. We're seeing inflation in the stock market. We're seeing inflation in the housing market. We're seeing inflation in education. Think about why are we seeing inflation in all these areas? We're also seeing inflation in fresh foods. Why are we seeing inflation in these areas? Because if you really think about it and you break it down, and you break down the major ones, same thing with automobiles. Automobiles, housing, education, health insurance. Well, Obama, remember back then, he made it mandatory that everyone have health insurance or you're penalized. So they tried to force everyone into health insurance. And no matter what you did, you had to pay for it, especially if you were ill. If you wanted to buy a house, you would have to take out a loan. If you wanted to go to school, college, you would have to take out a loan. If you wanted to buy a car, you would have to take out a loan. This was done on purpose because they knew they could stuff the inflation in these different areas and people would just take loans out and they would feel, okay, I don't really notice it. I have to pay this off. I've been paying it off. It's not a big deal. Health insurance, people noticed, but they had to do it or they were penalized. So they stuffed inflation into many different areas. And right now, as the economy breaks down and people aren't making more money, we're seeing the interest on all this debt continually rise. So on the national debt, right now, there's $650 billion of interest that has to be paid. Think about this for a second. It's more than $500 billion of interest. That's an interest payment. It's not the total. So one or two things have to happen here. Either all Americans make enough and the tax receipts that are coming into the government, there's more than enough, it's paid off, no problems, the government has more than enough money because the money has to go for that interest payment and to pay for everything else in the government. Remember, that's just the interest payment part of it. If it's not enough, the government has to borrow money. And that's what we're seeing today, because it's not enough. And they have to continually borrow. If they continually borrow, what happens to the interest payment? Well, we have to pay more. If wages and salaries aren't going up and the tax receipts aren't coming in, the government has to borrow more to pay for that interest payment. Now the interest payment is even more. This cycle cannot be sustained. It's a no-win situation. And actually, it reminds me of a quote from Henry Ford. And he said, "It is well enough that people of the nation do not understand our banking and monetary system. For if they did, I believe there would be a revolution before tomorrow morning." And it's true. There would be a revolution. Actually, Trump, Q, have been telling us if the American people learn the truth, we'd see a revolution, riots, and everything else. This is why Q, the Patriots, Trump, they've been dropping a lot of breadcrumbs. Look how much Trump has been tweeting out about the deep state, about the banking system, about the Fed. This is all being done on purpose. And he tweeted out today the following: "Always heard that as a president, it's all about the economy. Well, we have one of the best economies in the history of our country. Big GDP, lowest unemployment, companies coming back to the U.S. in big numbers, great new trade deals happening, and more. But little media attention." Now, he's letting everyone know that he has taken this economy, used the manipulation of the deep state, of the central bankers, and made it look incredible. Now, why doesn't the mainstream media want to even look at this? Yes, they'll look at certain numbers and things like that, because they understand that this whole thing has been manipulated. They understand what Trump has done. But Trump is bringing them down a path. And with the help of the Fed, he is bringing them down a path which will eventually allow the American people to see what the Fed has been doing. How is he doing this? Well, the mainstream media, they think they're in control. Other central bank heads think they are in control. And from Q, we know from Q's post, they already know that they're planning for a recession in 2020. Now, I do believe that Trump has control over Powell. He's been pointing the finger at the Fed, contradicting the Fed. And if you go back in time, which we did in our other report, he has tweeted out many, many tweets about the Fed and how the Fed has to be reined in, about gold, and also Q told us that gold will destroy the Fed. But we need to understand that he is bringing them down this path through the maze where they do believe they're in control. Now, when 2020 hits and he tells the Fed at this time, we're not going to have a recession. We're going to keep the manipulation going. And it will look like nothing is wrong because this is what they've done in the past. Remember, he has the magic wand. The mainstream media is not going to know what to do. The deep state is not going to know what to do because they've been planning on this and they think that the Fed is with them. But the Fed is not. Now, this doesn't mean there's not going to be a recession. There will be a recession. And Trump will blame it on the Fed. Now, we don't have the exact time and date that all this is going to happen, but he's going to switch it around on them. Remember, we went through this. Andrew Jackson's hanging on his wall. And we know why Andrew Jackson's hanging on the wall, because the plan is to get rid of the Fed. Now, who signed the Federal Reserve Act of 1913? Well, this was President Wilson. And out of wealthresearchgroup.com, there's a free report, which I'm going to read a little section of it, but if you want to read the rest, you can go there and get it. This is about what happened when Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. The national debt catapulted from $3 billion to $24 billion during his presidency. Because what are the central bankers? What do? What's their product? It's debt. So we went from $3 billion to $24 billion in debt during Wilson's presidency. And in his final years, Wilson said the following: "I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men." Right there and then, Wilson told us how dangerous the central bank was, the Federal Reserve. They call themselves the Federal Reserve to sound official, part of the government, but it's really the central bank. Pennsylvania Representative Lewis T. McFadden was even harsher. When the Federal Reserve Act was passed, the people of the United States did not perceive that a world banking system was being set up here. A superstate controlled by international bankers and industrialists acting together to enslave the world. Every effort has been made by the Fed to conceal its powers, but the truth is the Fed has usurped the government. And he's absolutely right. The Fed is dangerous. The Fed needs to be removed. And it's not an easy task. And we can see how dangerous and what the Fed has done to this country. This is why Q, Trump, the Patriots are on a mission to destroy the central bank, take it over, to abolish the IRS, to take all the treasonous people and put them into jail. Because if we don't do this, if we don't go to the source and get rid of all of this, it's just going to come back and haunt us again. Because remember, this is the third central bank in the United States. And the way they have to proceed with this, and I'm talking about Trump, those people that are working behind him, they have to wake up everyone and make everyone understand how bad the central bank is to the people of the United States and the world. So people always remember. Yes, as time goes on, they will forget. Most likely we'll have to do this all over again. Founding fathers have told us this, but we need to do this now. And it has to be planned out perfectly. And this is what they're in process of doing right now. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.